So cool features obviously pop out. So you can make this thing separate. Something else, if I right click and open up preferences, and now look at the name of this. The name is JDS 2900. If you look at your panel of 63 generators over there, they're all going to say Spooky 2, unless you rename it and say Remote and Fred. And now that generator has a name. So now when you're looking at your panel of 63 generators, you know which one belongs to which. When you create a sequence, in fact, I'm just going to redock this temporarily here and unload it. So I'm going to pick one of these, let's say sequence, let's do this one, HPA axis balance. Now, if you look at this, voltage is 10 volts, it's a sine wave, and it's synced, so both channels are exactly the same. What if I have a spooky plasma system or a Genesis plasma system or a PEMF or a laser or one of Lewis's via DNA remotes? Question is, how do I modify this sequence to run on that various equipment? Because for this, if I want to run this sequence on a spooky plasma, I have to change the voltage to 5 volts, change the waveform to square wave. I have to set the offset to 2.5 volts. I have to set the duty cycle to 50%. I have to change channel 2 frequency to 3.1 megahertz. There can't be a sweep on channel 2 frequency. It has to be just a set frequency. In fact, if there is something in channel 2, I need to ignore it. I have to do all of that stuff to make this run on a spooky plasma. Thing is, I've got right here, we've got overrides. It says select the device type. All we have to do is say plasma spooky. And if I drop this sequence in here, now when this runs, if you run this and go look at the output of your generator, you're going to see that channel 2 is 3.1 megahertz. Both channels are 5 volts, 2.5 volts offset. Everything is set for you. You don't have to know how to go set all that for the spooky plasma. And better than that, or more than that, if I have frequencies that are less than 100 kilohertz, they won't run on a spooky plasma properly. You have to be at least 100 kilohertz. Or if I have a frequency greater than 3.5 megahertz, it won't run on a spooky plasma. And so as part of this override, I divide down frequencies that are too high by octaves or multiply them if they're too low to make all the frequencies work for spooky plasma. So same thing with the Rivetech plasma. We set all the voltages correctly. We divide down any frequencies that are above 900 kilohertz. The Rivetech plasma will run all the way down to 0 hertz. So we don't need to multiply any up. And so we take care of all those settings for you. And if you have, let's say, a laser, such as other laser, we make sure the voltage is set to 10 volts, square wave, no offset. If it's PEMF, we make sure to set it to sine wave. So we do all of those settings for you. You don't have to worry about it. Your job is just put together the sequence of frequencies and we'll do the settings for you. Now, if you happen to have one of Lewis's remotes, we do a lot of those settings for you also. These overrides are actually PowerShell scripts. It's an actual programming language. So when something says generic equipment, if I open this editor and look at it, it's actually a program. And it's a program that what happens is when you load a sequence, this program runs on the sequence and modifies the settings for you.
Yeah.
Because of Lewis's knowledge, et cetera, we actually have code that sets the offsets correctly for each generator that it runs on. So it'll detect, am I on a Spooky or am I on a Junetech, and sets the offsets accordingly. And then with Lewis's, we do more than that. He actually, when we have voltages, you can vary the voltage going into one of his remotes. We actually check and make sure that the voltage doesn't get too high and mess up the override or mess up the offset.
Yeah.
And so we check the voltages, we check the offsets, we check frequencies, we modify things correctly. And so all of these overrides, they can do a lot of work for you so that you don't have to. And so for Cleveland, if you have a special circumstance, it's like you really need something to be done on every one or on a lot of your systems that it's not doing, have a conversation with me and we might be able to put it into an override for you. I think I've covered most everything here. Just a couple of fine details. If I want to edit HPA axis balance, I can't just double click and edit it because it's loaded into a generator. I have to unload it first because we don't want to be able to edit a sequence that's in the middle of running because then that gets too confusing. Right. Okay. So now that I've unloaded it, I can go ahead and open that up and edit it. A couple other cool things. Startup display. This controls what's over on the right here. And so if you have a website that you always want to go to, let's say I want to go to electroherbalism.com every time. Okay. Now, if I close this up and reopen it, now over on the right-hand side, I actually have a website. And so I could actually go in here and I can play around and I can look if this happens to be a favorite website of mine, or I could have an informational website or whatever. Now, another really nice feature here is the newest versions of Windows have made it really difficult to not use Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. And color me a skeptic, but I don't trust Microsoft with my data ever. So Jason has put in select a default browser. So you can go select which browser you want as your default. And you can say other, and then you could go find Brave. If Brave happens to be your favorite, you have to go navigate to it. And you can set Brave as it. You can set whichever browser, and that way when you show ICU, it'll use your browser to open it up and it'll ignore all the Microsoft settings. Then if you hear that David has come up with a new ICU version, he's added a bunch of sequences you want. If you go under help, download update, ICU, and install, it'll install the latest ICU. You'll need to be connected to the internet, obviously, but that'll update ICU for you. And it's all done. You don't have to go navigate anything else. You just say update the ICU and it does that. If we go here, oops, hang on, wrong spot. If you look here, we drop an icon on your desktop called Shatter. If you open that up, this is the folder here where all the ICU resources are. This is where all your overrides are. So if you get one, you get a new one, you could just drop a new one in. Next time you run Shatter, it'll find it and it'll put it in the list for you.